Today we are going to discuss about the history of English in Myanmar. Historically, reasons and motivations for learning English in Myanmar have varied in accord with the changing political, social, and economic circumstances. Today, about 67% of population speaks Myanmar as their mother tongue, while other languages are spoken among 135 different ethnic groups in the country. English language instructions is compulsory at all levels of education. Prior to the colonial era, Myanmar, which has a long literary tradition, was the most widely spoken language. During the period of British rule around 1886 to 1948, the status of Myanmar declined and English was adopted as the official language of public administration and medium of instruction and education. However, in the 1920s to 1930s, nationalist sentiment led to Myanmar being reinstated as the language of instructions at some universities. Upon gaining independence in 1948, the new government declared that Myanmar to be the first country's official language. In 1964, there was a major reform of education system in Myanmar became the medium of instructions at all levels, with English taught only as a foreign language. However, it was soon recognized that standards of English were declining, and in the 1970s, English was again made a compulsory subject for kindergarten and also became to be used as the medium of instructions at higher levels of education. It is seen that in the history of English in Myanmar, English has played an important role in Myanmar in educational, political, and social spheres. Accordingly, citizens of Myanmar have been motivated to learn English for academic and professional advancement. Furthermore, the recent political reforms in 2010 have opened the country to international influences and have led to even greater interest in learning English. Students at the university level are required to study their subject in English. One student explained that, in our country, we have to learn everything, like in engineering or medicine, through the medium of English. If you do not know English, you cannot be an expert to your degree or subject. To meet this rising demand, new English language schools have been opened throughout the country. One teacher at such a school commented on his students' desire to learn English as follows: "Now, we can deal with a lot of foreign companies and foreigners. Before, we could not deal this way because the country closed the doors when we were young. The children now are very lucky." Many younger Myanmaris in particular see the growing market in tourism as an employment opportunity and are consequently motivated to learn English. An examination of language education policy in Myanmar, Lewin noted that learning the English language may lead to economic advancement, help in dealing with the outside world, and improve prospects of study abroad and employment. However, he also pointed out that a potential threat among rising generations is that they prefer the pragmatic value of learning English rather than the cultural value of the indigenous natural languages. Lewin's recommendation regarding this dilemma is to have elementary schools study in three languages: their mother tongue, the official language, or Myanmar, and English. Now let us look upon on the status of English language in the country Myanmar or Burma. Various researchers and educations have taken different approaches in defining the role of English in the position or status of English in Southeast Asia, especially in Myanmar. In recent years, the most common term applied to the use of English in countries where it is not predominant mother tongue are English as lingua franca and world Englishes. The term world Englishes refers to a local varieties of English, especially those that they have developed in areas that have been influenced by the United States and United Kingdom. The most widely accepted description of world Englishes is Cochrus definitions of English varieties. into three groups. Those groups are the inner circle, the outer circle, and the expanding circle. The inner circle refers to the areas where English developed and is today the most common mother tongue. The outer circle refers to the areas where English was spread through colonial expansion and is widespread use. And the expanding circle refers to the area where English has been widely adopted, usually for some specific purposes, particularly for communication in business or academia. Despite its history as a British colony, Myanmar is usually considered as a member of the expanding circle. Kanagaraha has proposed an alternate description of English language used in Southeast Asia. He pointed out that the concept of world Englishes deals with highly systematic and stable varieties of English in post-colonial communities. In contrast to this view, Kanagaraha positions English language used in Southeast Asia as a part of plurilingual tradition in the region. A plurilingual perspective of a speaker proficiency is not viewed in terms of competencies in individual discrete language, but is seen as an integrated competencies embracing a number of languages. Typically, this language will be used for different purposes, and language use emerges as a function of interlocutors' individual repertoires. Kanagaraha's account of plurilingualism has implication for English language teaching. He suggested that what we need is a paradigm shift in language teaching. Pedagogy should be refashioned to accommodate the modes of communication and acquisition seen outside the classroom. Such a focus entails a refocusing of goals of language learning rather than aiming the native speaker like competence in a single target. The learner must develop strategies for coping with a repertoire of different codes in various plurilingual systems. Proficiency is not defined by the learner's knowledge of second language form, but by one's ability to accomplish communicative goals. Kanagaraha pointed out, however, that defining competencies as the ability to shift between codes does not preclude the ability to produce standard language when the situation requires it. He also noted that this focus on practice still leaves a place for a classroom language learning. He recommended that the pedagogy focus on language awareness and learner strategy training. Lewin's recommendation for language pedagogy echoes Karagaraha. Without specifically referring to plurilingualism as Karagaraha has described it, for Lewin, the issue of language education in Myanmar is related to culture, national identity, and politics. In his consideration of the various ethnic and linguistic groups in Myanmar, Lewin suggested that the ethnic educators and political leaders promote their languages for use of medium of instructions. Students whose mother tongue is not Myanmar would learn Myanmar and English as their second languages. Students whose mother tongue is Myanmar would learn English and another ethnic language as their second languages.
Language policy is generally seen as a national level decision regarding which language the state will support and which is public domains. However, the reality is that language policy plays out of regional and local levels as well. In fact, it could be argued the most important institution of language policy are those which directly determine local language behavior in institutions such as school, government, and civil society, using data drawn from Kenya. This article examines the formulation and implementation of language policy as it plays out in a primary classroom. The relationship between language policy implementation at the classroom level and student early literacy outcome and explored, giving insight into how the degree of adherence to language policy in the classroom intersect with student achievement.
So, the English Proficiency Program, or DEPP, is the English language training program designed to prepare candidates who are not native speakers of English and who wish to achieve a high quality internationally recognized certificate in English. It covers training and exams in the four skills of English language. We have reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So the program is structured to develop knowledge and understanding of reading, writing, listening, and speaking form of English in meaningful contexts. So develop students' ability to read, write, listen, and talk for gist and detail, and apply knowledge and understanding to the four skills developed. So students' ability to communicate effectively in English through the written and spoken word. So develop English knowledge and understanding of English grammar and the ability to apply accurately in the approximate context and lay a suitable foundation for the further study of the language and to prepare students to take the TEP or Test of English Proficiency. So, many people equate policy with law and politics. Sometimes that brings to mind lawmakers and politicians rather than educator. So however, teachers are central to policy implementation in a number of ways. So classroom can return educational policy into action. Teachers are key actors who enact language policies in education. Teachers make decisions about which languages to use during the instruction with language to encourage among learners and which languages or varieties are not accepted in the classroom. So language attitude have sometimes to do with the English EFL learning. So these attitudes may influence students to learn or not to learn the English language in the required manner. So there are some factors like educational factors, social factors, learning personality factors, and other factors which in turn affect the attitudes of learners towards learning EFL. So therefore, it needs to conduct research to know the extent to which these factors affects learning attitudes towards learning or EFL. So this study was done to factor affecting the attitude learners, attitude towards learners, EFL. This study was done on factors affecting the attitude of graded student toward learning EFL to gather the valid data, and researcher used questionnaires, interview, the focus group, discussions. He analyzed the gathered data quantitatively and qualitatively. So the finding of the study showed that the social factors affected students' attitudes positively, but educational context factors that had negative impact on students. So attitudes. However, learners have positive attitudes towards the educational context factors.
Today, we are going to talk about the features of English language in Myanmar. What are the distinct features in terms of grammar, pronunciation, and others? The basic structure of sentences in English is SVO or subject verb object, but in the Myanmar language word order is SOV. Therefore, the default grammatical order is always subject verb object. The literary forms that were used in Myanmar: historical ballads, panegyric ode, metrical versions of Buddhist stories, and various other types of poetic forms, along with exhortatory letters, constitute within this literature. Prose works written in Burmese during this long period are comparatively few. The eight parts of speech in Myanmar, according to Myanmar grammar, the general parts of speech are noun, pronoun, verb, adverb, preposition, conjunction, and particle. Among them, particle is part of speech that supports the meaning of the other parts of speech: noun, pronoun, verb, adverb, and preposition. English accent used in Myanmar, Burmese is often characterized by its unaspirated consonants similar to Indian English. It also borrows words from Standard English and uses them in a slightly different context. For an instance, pavement is in British English or sidewalk in US English, and in Burmese English, it is commonly called platform. English pronunciation problems for Burmese speakers. Areas of pronunciation such as pronunciation words, endings, using and pronouncing past tense endings, consonant clusters, word stress, weak vowels, and double vowels are also challenging for many Burmese speakers. Others in Myanmar that wrote English poetry and short story. First, Maung Day, poet, artist, translator, has published 6 poetry books in Burmese and 1 in English. His poetry has appeared in International Poetry Review in Guernica, The Wolf, The Owl, and elsewhere. Myanmar, 1998, U.P. Mint, fiction writer, born 1949, Rakhine State, Myanmar, has published over 25 books of fiction, non-fiction, and translated works, including, among many others, Those Who Sell Things for Human Use and Other Stories, winner of 1995 National Literary Award, and some of his other original translated works include On Death and Other Short Stories in 1993, Normal Mind and Normal Behavior, a collection of articles on applied psychology on 1993, Ward Number 6, translation 1997, and First Love, translation on 1998. Mr. Yu was educated in medicine at the Institute of Medicine in Yangon and in journalism at the Indochina Media Memorial Foundation in Bangkok. He worked as a medical practitioner for 11 years and now serves as an editor for 2 publishing houses. 2006 resident Yu Mo-hin works in Burmese as well as in English. His translations include literary criticism and philosophy and the Burmese poetry collections True Lives, Perils on 1983 and Sweet Odor of Paddock and Dok Champa on 2002. In 1998, 2 of his poems were anthologized by the National Library of Poetry in Maryland. In 1999, Mr. Mu published his first book of poetry in English, Harmony of Head and Heart, and is currently working on a second volume. He teaches English language, Buddhist philosophy, and ethics to monks the State Priyati Sasana University, Yangon. He participates courtesy of the Open Society Institute. In 2007, resident Ketmar is one of Myanmar's most active literary voices. She has published 1 novel, Wild Snowy Night, 1995, a volume of essays, Learning from My Son, 2001, and a collection of short stories with 3 other women writers, The Pink Before Dark, 1996. Her work has appeared in numerous journals and magazines, and it was adapted into radio plays, and a story, not novel, was made into a short film in Japan, and currently she works as a freelance journalist in Yangon. In 2011, resident Cho Tu-zao, novelist, filmmaker, poet, essayist, activist, and after years of political organizing, has more than 20 screenwriting and directing credits, including Another Lonely World, 2010, The Lost, 2011, and most recently, Let's Make a Dialogue on Love, 2011. He is the author of the novels Some Used to Hate, 2006, and Once Upon a Time in Ganges,
2010. His poems and articles have been featured in a number of magazines. In the next 10 years, I believe English language in Myanmar will widespread quickly because of their situation. Although English language is only taught as a popular foreign language, but the government officials realize the importance of learning English due to the nature of their work, which requires them to deal and communicate, especially with their foreign stakeholders.